Oh my gosh.
All right.
All right. Let me. Welcome back to the Christ in Culture. This is Clint.
And this is Gordon.
And this is us. So here we are, guys. Yeah, it's good to be back. Actually, I'm really glad that we're doing this late at night because a couple hours ago, we have new neighbors upstairs. Let's leave it at that. And they have 2 dogs, 2 young kids, and they play guitar and other musical instruments. So pretty sure all 3 were happening at the same time earlier. There were children and dogs running around while they were playing guitar, and it sounded super loud. So it's a good thing that's over, so that's not coming through the mics. But how are you doing? You just came from youth group, yeah?
I did. I just came from youth group. It was really good. We had like 13 kids show up, which I think might be a high for this semester so far. I mean, we've been peaked around like 11, but we had one kid who just went on his first retreat this past weekend because I also had a retreat this weekend.
Which sounded awesome, by the way.
It was awesome. Yeah, he was in my confirmation class. He was one of the, for lack of better words, because he's a great kid, one of the troublemakers in that class. Okay. And after confirmation, we had like a mystagogia night. So like a week after talking about like, how do you feel? And, just kind of like more prayer. And 3 kids, all the troublemakers signed up for the retreat that day because they weren't going to see me next week. And I reminded him. And he signed up first, actually. His name's David. And then got his other kids to sign up. And he came to youth group today.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because we told him about it Sunday after he left, and he showed up. So,
dang, that's so cool.
Yeah, I think he really experienced something great this past weekend.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I was just more excited. I'm just excited to see him every time he walks in. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, so for any new listeners, just to clarify, so Gordon is a missionary with the Door Ministries.
This is correct.
And he's kind of in charge of the youth program for Shrine of the True Cross,
yes,
essentially, which is a parish that was essentially destroyed by Hurricane Harvey in almost every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And so they're still recovering from that and trying to build up this youth ministry at the same time. So
yeah, and it's been great. I think this year I've seen a ton of fruits in my mission here, but I think this year, like 2019, it's just been the most prevalent so far.
Yeah.
So I think that's been great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you guys started doing your praise and worship nights or no, just worship nights?
Worship nights. Adore used to have I think that's what they were called.
Worship nights.
Adore worship nights at the Charismatic Center. Mm-hmm. We still have some like Northwest Houston at Prince of Peace.
Yeah.
I think
so. That sounds right.
Is that where the Regads are? Yes. Okay. So Prince of Peace, we still have some, but the one in the Charismatic Center fell down because the idea generally was like the community, our parish community, and then all the mission communities around Houston could like come together and like worship, but it just wasn't ideal. Mm-hmm. And so now we're trying to have a worship night in each of our missions to feed into the surrounding community.
Gotcha.
Which probably was a better idea in the first place, but that's how you learn.
Cool.
Make mistakes.
Yeah, no, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool ministry.
How are you?
Good. It's been kind of a roller coaster since the last time I've been on, to be honest. The last couple weeks have been super exciting. I don't know if I talked about it last time I was on here, but I
haven't listened to that episode yet.
Oh. Well, anyways, I'll say it again, I guess. So I tried doing a lot of updates to my health regimen, I guess, is a way to say it. So I've been working on like a stricter sleep schedule and healthier foods and trying to work out every day just to, I don't know, just be healthier and be more productive. So even though I've been getting less sleep, I've been more energized every day, which has been really cool. But yeah. And then this week kind of hit, and it's like, it's not a bad week. It's just not as high as the last couple weeks have been. So yeah, it's just been kind of a middle ground, I would say. So nothing bad, just good stuff.
Yeah.
in general. So,
Can you believe in 2 weeks we will be in Holy Week?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I know.
I was talking to Lizzie today, and I said that, and she's like, "Yeah, I know. I was kind of thinking today, like, man, I need to take Lent more seriously. Like, oh no, not like I haven't." She's like, and I'm not trying to call her out because she's like, I'm not taking Lent seriously, but it just it felt like such a subtle Lent. You're like I'm doing the things, I'm in this Lent, but then when like Easter starts creeping up, you're like, was I doing enough? Or like,
yeah, it's flown by. And to be honest, I was just talking with some of my adult volunteers the other day. I feel like this whole semester and this whole year have flown by because we only have 3 nights, counting tomorrow, left for our middle school program.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You guys end early.
I think we're actually one of the latest in the area. So,
I don't know. That's awesome.
It's.
I mean, that's not what I meant. You know what I meant?
Well, it's awesome, but it's not awesome at the same time. It's a mixed emotions.
It's a thing.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool because our last couple nights of the year are really big nights, and the very last one we bring in all the families of the kids who are registered.
That's cool.
And so we have like this big family picnic kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like a chance for the middle school kids to showcase what they learned, and it turns out like they really like to show off to their parents what they learned. And then also it helps the whole families take what they have been talking about all year and bring it into their family in like a practical way. So that's really cool, but also takes a lot of prep work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the big thing right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. So what have you been taking in as far as media content?
I've been watching a lot of movies.
Okay.
Like a lot. I also finished my first book of the year.
What?
Yeah. Won't mention that one because that's going to be a future.
It's going to be coming up.
Future thing. There's a reason I was reading it, but Gomer was right. Audiobooks are amazing. So, but because I think you and Steve did the last two, so it's been a while since I've been on here, and we didn't really go over media last episode, but
with that Catholic couple.
But in the past, 3 weeks, I saw Life of Brian with Lizzie, which is a Monty Python movie on Netflix. I think it's hilarious. She loved it. It's the life of a guy who was born the same day Jesus was born. So it's in that era. And so they just make fun of a lot of religion. So if you don't like that stuff, don't watch it. But it is really funny. I watched Under the Skin, which is the woman that plays Black Widow.
Oh, Scarlett Johansson.
Gosh,
that took me a second.
She's an alien who lures guys into her house, which is like this liquid pool, and eats them. Or I don't know what she does with them, but yeah.
So she's essentially like a mean version of Black Widow.
Sure.
Because that's what Black Widow does. She lures men and kills them.
Yeah, essentially, with much less speaking.
Okay.
And then I watched a really, really cool movie with the Sackfords, Danny and Nick Sackford. We had a double date, and we watched. Okay. It was called The Man Who Killed Hitler, and then The Bigfoot.
Were you talking about this one, or was maybe Nick was? I feel like
probably Nick.
I heard a little bit, but okay, continue.
Yeah, so it's the title is literally what the movie's about. It's about the man who killed Hitler. It's post-war. So in the war, there was a rumor that he was the one that killed Hitler. Mm-hmm. And so Bigfoot comes around, and he's diseased. So the disease is spreading essentially, and it's a disease that's not contained, and so they want Bigfoot to be killed essentially. So they hire this guy who has a great record because he killed Hitler, because he's a great tracker, to track down and kill Bigfoot as well. But it's not about the killing of Hitler. It's not about the killing of Bigfoot. It's just about him,
the man,
and his internal struggles and his life because of this, and what he did have and what he could have had. And it's really well done.
For those of you who are wondering, it's not a documentary.
No,
it's very much not true.
No. It's totally just a Gordon made up fictional movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Check your history books.
Yeah. Bigfoot's real, but nobody
clearly
killed Hitler.
Yeah. Hitler lived in Brazil. That is all. Did I tell you about my brother and I actually started watching over Christmas break. It was like Hunting Hitler, I think is what it's called. Did I tell you about that?
It was like modern day.
It's a documentary about like trying to track what really happened to Hitler, and like his closest people, and so they try and track this possible path based off of eyewitness rumors and stuff like that. It was interesting, but I mean, it's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So.
No, you didn't tell me about that.
Oh, well, there you go. 3 months late. That's what I was watching in December.
Also, the last thing is last week. I know you saw this too, but we both saw Unplanned.
Yeah.
Which is the new pro-life movie.
Yeah.
About I forget her name.
Abby Johnson.
Abby Johnson, which
Yeah.
I didn't even know who that was until this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, she's from here. Well, I guess you
Well, I
watched
knew that now.
Yeah. So, I just found out this last year that her daughter, the one that's in the movie, they talk about in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
she actually goes to the Pines, which is where I used to work.
Oh.
So, during the summer, she goes to camp there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is really cool. So, yeah, awesome movie, Unplanned. It is rated R, but I'm going to be honest, there was some stuff that made me, I don't know, kind of nauseous, but it wasn't because anything was shown that was super nauseous. It was more of like understanding what was happening.
Yeah, it's totally just an understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say, even though it's rated R and there is some gross stuff, I don't think it's comparable to other rated R films that are out right now.
Yeah, I think this is different than like a rated R movie where it's like, it's rated R because it's like, I was going to say about this film, it's rated R because it's showing stuff that is actually happening and it's true. But so can some other rated R movies, but other rated R movies where it's like, well, I'm showing like this nude scene because that's really what happens. Where it's like, okay, but
yeah,
still maybe not necessary.
Yeah. So all this to say, like, I have heard of families that went. I mean, obviously don't bring your small children, but I don't know. If you're a parent, you can use your judgment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What about you?
Well,
besides Unplanned,
that was actually the top of my list. So,
all right.
Great
segue.
Yeah, perfect. I actually started reading a new book, and I'm almost done with it. But do you remember the Inheritance books? So, like Aragon and Brissinger, books like that.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. So Christopher Paolini, who's the author, released a new book in that world that takes place kind of afterwards, and it's just some filler stories. It's not really anything of substantial value other than here's some extra stories of like things that are happening in the world after that series ends. And so it's just 3 short stories, really choppy, a lot of holes in the stories. It's just, I don't know. It's almost like he took his notes for things that happened afterwards and put them into some stories.
Yeah.
And then his sister, Angela, who was the inspiration for the witch character, she wrote a story from the witch's perspective that's in there too. So it's called The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm. And it's basically just 3 short stories about a fork, a witch, and a worm. So
that sounds awesome.
it's kind of cool. It's super easy to read because he writes stuff for like middle schoolers, you know? So I've just been crushing through it pretty easily.
Do you have it? It's like a physical thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's in my room right now.
Huh.
So
okay.
Pretty good. I really like that series. I know that Paolini stole from a lot of different fantasy authors, but I don't know. I think he puts a decent twist on it. And like even when I used to try to write stories and books, he definitely influenced my stuff a lot. So I always appreciate reading his stuff when it comes out every 10 years, it seems like. And then the other thing that I've been taking in is just a ton of podcasts. I think I've listened to almost 200 episodes in the last 2 weeks.
Wow.
So like I've just been crushing them, which is actually something that I stole from Gomer too. Because do you remember when we had him on, he was talking about how he never listens to anything at normal speed anymore? Yeah, I totally stole that. So I've been listening to everything at double speed while I'm at work.
Is it a game changer?
It is. Which you would think that the retention rate of like what they're talking about is just lost when it's that fast. But I think you got to know your show.
Yeah, no, I mean, he talks about, I've heard him talk about this on Catching Foxes.
Oh,
he's
really?
like, listen to it at double speed. And he's like, and you'd be surprised. Like it's no different. I mean, it's just quicker.
And if you're someone who's used to listening to podcasts a lot or used to a show, so I don't know. I think it's easier if you know the voices and you can kind of recognize what they're talking about. But then also different shows talk at different speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And different hosts talk at different speeds. So like when you and I are on and I'm listening to our stuff, it's really easy to go double speed because you and I talk pretty slow.
Right.
But then if Steve's on, maybe I'll slow it down to like 1.5 because he talks faster than we do. But yeah, it's just kind of really knowing your show. So yeah, I've been listening to us. I've been listening to a lot of Dungeons and Dragons podcasts. Bishop Barron, Father Mike Schmitz, Catching Foxes, Catholic Stuff You Should Know. And I just started listening today to Clerically Speaking, which I'm sure a lot of people that listen to us listen to them too. They're really, really big now.
Yeah.
Just started back in like August, I think, but they're one of the biggest Catholic podcasts already. So
Is it good?
it is good.
Because I've been wanting to check it out, but I just haven't yet.
Yeah. So like I said, I just started today, so I'm only, I think like 4 or 5 episodes in so far. But yeah, it's hour of discussion based. They only have priests on.
Yeah.
Like no other hosts, guest hosts. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, they have, I'm sure you've heard about this, but they're Summa Tweetologica, which is where they just go through tweets that they think are cool and talk about why they like them or disagree with them. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's a lot of cool insight into what it's like to be a priest. And yeah, so that's kind of cool stuff so far.
Nice.
That's what I got.
Okay. And then the last thing that I watched, which was yesterday. So I came in originally wanting to record about that book, which is why I've been reading it. And I was like, all right, got to finish it. But then me and Lizzie took yesterday like super easy.
Yeah.
Because when we were leaving the camp from the retreat this weekend, she had a flat tire. And she also has like, I don't know if you guys know what wheel locks are, but like the lug nuts that hold the wheel in that you take out, one of them needs a special key to unlock. People put that in usually to keep their cars from wheels being like taken. You need the key you hold on to, and then put that part of the.
So that's what. Okay, I was trying to understand like what you were describing. I was just like, what on her tire is locked?
The wheel.
I thought you were talking about she got a boot, but I'm like, how did someone put a boot on
at the camp
while she's at camp? That doesn't make any sense, Gordon. But whatever.
And so clearly we jacked it up. We did everything we could to see if we can get it off. It's from a used dealership, so whoever owned it previously put those on, and she never got the key, so she doesn't have that. So we left it there. We figured out like how our kids could get home because she drove some of the kids there, and it all worked out. And then I drove back with her yesterday, first thing in the morning, with Kevin's like tire pump. Went to the store to buy all the tools to like makeshift get it off, because I looked up videos. You can just hammer stuff in it. You can like make it work. And then I got inside tire sealant. So we got there. We sealed it first from the inside, filled it up, drove it around a bit, see if it like was leaking or if it was sealed, and it was good. So we took it to a tire place, replaced the tire, and that took like till like 3 o'clock yesterday, from like 8 a.m. to 3 o'clock, because we had to drive all the way to Forest Glen and back.
So I'm trying to envision this. Did you just like bring a big hammer and just pound this?
No, we didn't have to do anything because we patched it.
Oh, gotcha.
That was just a backup plan. And then we drove it to a tire shop, and we're like, 1, can you just see if there's still a leak? And 2, can you get all the tire locks off of every tire? And they're like, sure. So there was not still a leak, but there was like real big tears, so they had to replace a tire, and then they took off the tire locks for no cost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you said hammer, I was like imagining like Lizzie just pounding this tire like...
You get like a socket, socket wrenches?
Yeah.
You get one of those that barely fits over the lug nut.
Yeah.
That's a lock. You hammer that on because it barely fits. So it's not like it's not like a perfect fit. It's just under. And you hammer that on, and then you just like torque wrench it off. Socket.
Huh.
And that's literally what they did at the tire shop. When we took it and they're like, can you take this off? They brought out this cart that had a bucket on it that said wheel locks. And then they had all these tools that are just like they're used to, and they hammered it on, torqued it off, and I was like, I knew it. So all of that was a long story to say that after we fixed her tire, we took the rest of the evening off. And so we went and got dinner, and then we went and watched a movie that just came out, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. But it is Jordan Peele's second movie, not Get Out. I almost said his first movie. It's Jordan Peele's second movie called Us.
Right.
His first movie was Get Out. And so it's the second debut since then. It was good.
It's not a sequel, though.
It's not a sequel.
Okay,
Just a
I didn't think so.
separate movie, same genre, like thriller, sort of scary, but not. Like, he really loves. He's going to be the host of the new reboot of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah,
which I love the Twilight Zone, and so
of course
you can tell that he enjoys the Twilight Zone too, because that's like his movies where they're like eerie and creepy. And at the end, you're like, there's this complete twist, and you're just like, oh, okay. So I thought Get Out was phenomenal. I think it was just a Twilight Zone or like a Black Mirror episode. That was a movie. And then this one was also really good. Me and Lizzie talked about it for a while. So, yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. Because I watched it, and I was like, how can I do this? I don't know, but we'll try. So,
cool.
Kind of to start, I want to talk about I want to put you on the spot as usual.
Fantastic. Let's go.
I want to talk about, like, who are we? And, like, where, like, I mean, I feel like it's self-explanatory. Who are we as people?
Okay.
And who is our person? So who is Clint versus who is me? Does that make sense? And then where did we, like, come from?
Wow. Okay. So I want to preface this with the fact that I literally just woke up when we started this show, because I had a migraine today, so I took a nap and woke up to Gordon trying to get into my apartment complex. So this is my tired answer. So that was 3 questions, right? So who are we?
Yeah.
What is, like, the essence of our individuality?
Yes.
And the third one was, where do we come from? Right? Okay. So let me see what I can do. Okay. So who are we as people? Right? As humans?
Versus what?
I don't know. Just like, who are we, like us, you and I, versus who are we as, like, a greater we?
Right. So the greater us.
We. Okay. Yeah. So trying to think, first thoughts, we are body soul composites. And I think to really understand who we are, we also need to understand the third question of where we came from. That's really the whole point of theology of the body. I'm going to try and be fancy here, and I'm probably going to mess it up, but our teleology, or our purpose, helps us understand who we are, right? And so that's the whole point of theology of the body. When we better understand what is our body, what is its purpose, like what was it made for, and how does that interact with our soul, and how does that help us understand who we are. So I would say that there's a lot of different kind of criteria to that, but our base is we are body-soul composites made by God and for God, which, if God is love, like we believe him to be, we are made from love for love, right? And without breaking down into, like, gender compatibilities and stuff like that, I think that's probably the broadest definition I give for like general humanity.
So who we are is an extension coming from love to love.
Yeah. So we are. All right. So we have God as love, right?
Right.
This is great because I've been talking about theology of the body all week. So,
yeah.
So God is a Trinity, right? So we have Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Okay. And so we are made in the image and likeness of God. And so if we're made in his image, that means we're made to reflect him.
Okay.
Right. And so we see that through the way that we are also made for community, right? So if the Trinity is a community of persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and we know that we as humans are made for community, right? And we see that in the fact that we want to be in relationships, that we want friendships, that we want to be known by others, right? But then we also see it through romantic relationships, through, well, we have the Father who's perfectly loving the Son who's perfectly receiving that love, and the Holy Spirit, which is the love itself. And so we see that same thing where within a marital relationship, we have the husband who's giving of himself, right? Physically and spiritually and emotionally, and a woman who receives that gift of the man and turns it into a third person, right? In the same way that the Trinity does.
Right.
Okay, and so in that way we image that, right? But we're also made in his likeness.
Yeah.
Right? So that means we are to be like him, literally. And so if he is God, I'm saying he is like the person of God.
Yeah.
Right? If God is love and we're to be like him, right? Then it means we also need to reflect that as well. Yeah. So looking at that, we are basically the reason why God would create us, because he doesn't need us, obviously, right? Because he's God. The reason why he would create us is out of love, out of a desire to share, right? And so because God is love itself and love perfected, love is always giving, and so it always overflows, right? And so he created us out of a desire to continue to love, right? And so we are made from love, but we're also made to return to God.
Right.
And so that's what I meant by we're made for love, because we're made to return to him, right, and to become more like him. That's a really long answer, but hopefully it makes sense.
Lizzie's priest texted her randomly yesterday morning and said that love is the agent between being and becoming.
Between being and becoming.
He said the same thing about the soul. And it kind of sounds like what you're talking about as far as like being love, but becoming. I think the becoming part comes, maybe this falls into my next question. What are we post the fall?
What are we post the fall?
Yeah,
okay.
So like who are we? How do we differ?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say that as far as, and this could be wrong theologically, so if someone knows, call me out. But I would say we're essentially, like, our essence is the same, right? So who we are has not changed, but we are distorted in a way.
Okay.
Right? So we're still made from God. We're still made for God. That has not changed. We're still a body-soul composite. We still have bodies and souls. The disconnect, and I was trying to teach this a little bit today to some middle schoolers with that magic trick that we talked about last summer, the rubber band one.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we look at that magic trick, so it's basically the magic trick where you have two rubber bands and you're trying to pull the one through the other.
Yeah, they're on your finger and pointer finger.
Yeah.
You stretch it and they're interlocked, so
they're stuck.
Yeah.
And so basically I was trying to show that one of these represents our body, one of these represents our soul, and when we're created, they're like when they're locked together, where they don't separate. They're working in unison. But because of the fall, and then I did the magic trick, now they're separated. Now they're going in different directions. And so we have this disconnect between our body and soul and what they desire and what they're doing. And so that's where the disconnect comes in. So we still have this desire to be with God. We still have this ultimate draw. And that's why our show works, because that still exists, right? But the disconnect is this doubt that came in through original sin, right? Because original sin is not necessarily eating a fruit. The original sin is not trusting God, like this doubt,
believing a lie.
Yeah. And so that's where we start having doubt come into the world, and so we see that kind of overflowing into this too, I think.
Okay. I ask because I think another thing that's like thrown around a bunch is we are human, and like or when Jesus wept, it's like, well, that was Jesus being showing his humanity. And I think, is it that our bodies, as a part of like body and soul composite, after the fall, our bodies are like a part of this brokenness? Does that make sense? Because it's like that's more of the earthly aspect of us.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I think there's an element to that, but I also think that when we're talking about Jesus in his humanity, we're always talking about ways that he relates to us. So like the gods of the time for the other cultures, well, I guess that's not entirely true. I was going to say that they don't show emotions, but you look at the Greeks and the Romans and you see a lot of emotions there. But it's very different. But I would say the God of the Old Testament, no, not even then. Yeah, you can cut that out because that's completely wrong. But when we focus on emotions, I think that's where people will start to relate to him more. Right. Right? Because Jesus wept, and that's like, for a lot of people, that's the most powerful verse in the whole Bible, even though it's only 2 words. Yeah. Just because it helps relate. I think that's one thing that people really like about Mary and the saints, too, is that they're just more attainable and relatable, it seems like. Right. Because it's harder to relate to the divine. So when the Gospels stress different aspects of Christ that we can relate to, I think that's more of what they're talking about. Because I wouldn't say that, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but Jesus wept. Weeping is not a broken thing. Weeping is a good thing, right? Thomas Aquinas even says, like, crying is good, right? He puts that right along with drinking alcohol and taking a bath and reading books, as far as
the Catholic Church and like the teaching on sex. Like it's not a evil. That's what we were talking about today. It's not an evil thing. Like it is a beautiful, good thing.
Yeah. So I think we kind of hit on this with what was the one with Will Smith that we did together?
Oh, Collateral Beauty.
Collateral Beauty. Yeah. So I think we hit on this a little bit, that the world that we live in has become distorted. Yeah. And it's always going to be distorted because something was put in motion where, like, the world is no longer the way it was created for. And so we live in this world that's already has brokenness. And so that brokenness leads to more brokenness. So I think to a certain extent, yes, we are broken. I think that does cross over too. Because, I mean, when you live in a world that is full of broken things and broken people, broken things happen.
Perfect. So let's dive in. Hopefully this will connect and make sense. I love that you used a word like disconnect, and you just said another one. But yeah, hopefully this will tie in. If it doesn't, this was a good discussion.
Cool.
But the start of this movie, and just so you guys know, I'm not going to spoil it. I will talk a lot about the theme. So, I mean, just so you know, if you want to see the movie, just wait. But I'm not going to spoil anything, hopefully. I'm just going to talk about like the general idea of the movie, which we sort of see from the previews. So it starts with a little girl who's at a carnival, like one on the pier, on a beach, with her family. She has a mom and a dad, and you can tell it's like a broken family. The dad's kind of like drinking and not really caring, and eventually she wanders off, and she finds like on the beach side this like mirror maze, in like it's like shaman mirror maze, and then has a neon lights with an arrow pointing in the door. It says "Find yourself." And so she walks inside. It's kind of spooky. She sees like a whole bunch of mirrors and starts whistling to like calm herself down. And then she hears someone else start whistling. And eventually she turns around to a mirror that showed the back of her head. But when she turns around, it doesn't turn around. And then it turns around and she's looking like straight at herself, but like she watched it turn around. And that's like the intro to the movie. And then it just like pans over, has like the full intro scene, creepy music. And then it starts with another family, the dad, a mom, and 2 kids. And you can quickly assume that the mom was this little girl.
Oh, okay.
So it like flashes forward.
Gotcha.
And they just bought a house not that far away from this beach. And ultimately, just to get through what the movie's about, within like the next day or two, within the same day, I don't remember how long it is, identical versions of the entire family shows up at the house. The dad, the mom, and the 2 kids, a girl and a boy.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And they talk about how like there's like this big monologue, and essentially they're trying to kill them all. And then you quickly learn that there's identical versions of everyone in the world. And like, because they finally like turn on the news and they see it and they're like, yeah, this is everyone. And they're all trying to kill their own like earthly version of like whatever they're a copy of.
Does it say where the clones are from? Or
when the news turned on, they said they realized they're coming from the sewers.
Oh, okay.
And the movie starts with these words of like there's a ton of underground like railway and like subway units that are just completely abandoned in the U.S.
Okay.
Some now that are still lying there completely like it's useless.
Huh.
And they just open that and then they start the movie.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, like that's essentially the movie. It's like figuring out like, okay, what's happening? How do we survive this? How do we beat this thing? And this will be like the one minor spoiler, if you just want to know. You come to find out that like it was a failed experiment from like the 80s when she was a kid, or like the 70s, where they tried to create these duplicates of people and then tether them to their duplicate on Earth. So they're living underground in these sewers, and they were tethered to that person. So the person on top, when they moved, the person below moved, and like all this stuff. But the person below, in essence, is just body, no soul, tethered to this person that's body and soul.
Interesting.
And the movie's them like they've finally figured this out because the little girl saw the other little girl, and they saw each other, and they started a revolt like 20 years later, and they just want to kill their copy and take over. So that's the movie. Honestly, still don't spoil anything. There's still like tons that doesn't explain, and it's still there.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I got this idea of watching it of just like two versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The opposites, and like darkness and light, and like sin and corruption or whatever, and it's like that. Sometimes like our opposite version of ourselves, our bad version of ourselves or whatever, the one that's hidden underground, like wants to come after us. Doesn't want to like live through us, but wants to totally be a part of us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think, I guess the first thing that kind of came to my mind as well is this kind of portrays what happens when we try to separate our body and soul, or see ourselves as one or the other, which is a pretty common spiritual thought nowadays.
Yeah.
Right. That we are soul trapped in our bodies, and our bodies are not us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's super dangerous to believe that, right? Because when we do that, we start to see our bodies as disposable, as things that we can do whatever we want to, right? And it's kind of a slippery slope when we do that, right? Because morality is almost gone when you do that. Because if it's just a thing, if your body's just a thing, then I should be able to do essentially whatever I want with that thing, right? And so, yeah, we kind of just lose track of morality. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that, but that was the first thing that came to my mind too, especially when you said when she went into the mirrors, the advertising was discover yourself, right?
Find yourself.
Find yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so find yourself is, I don't know, it's also kind of a
right
neo-spiritual
that was definitely what he was doing
topic.
there.
Yeah. Find yourself. And it's really just this fake image, which is ironic because it's in a mirror. Right?
Yeah, well, it's like looking inward. Yeah, it's a mirror maze.
It's a hall of mirrors, right? And so all you're seeing is this reflection of who you really are, rather than like not who you are itself, but just like this small aspect, and that's all you're kind of seeing because you're looking at the mirror, right? So rather than focus on the person as a whole, which is like what we were talking about before with the theology of the body and the body-soul composite working together, if you're not looking at yourself through that lens, then you're missing something.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important that John Paul II kind of compiled this theology. And I mean, the stuff that he put together, a lot of it wasn't even new stuff. He just compiled it in a way that no one had ever done before. Right. Yeah, so I think it's really important to look at that because, like I said, if we're going to understand who we are, we have to look at where we come from and why.
Yeah, and we talked about this on the retreat, and we talked about this tonight when, like, you know, at the rise of like the sexual revolution is when like JP2 wrote this and it was such a big deal. Yeah. And so we asked the kids tonight, like, what's the opposite of love? and someone said like, well, in a sort of sense, you can say the opposite of love is, because obviously the obvious answer was hate, but they said in a sort of sense, you can say the opposite of love is selfishness. And so like there is an aspect to looking inward, especially like meditative prayer and like that. And like, but when you're like finding yourself, like the whole, this was something I was said on the retreat, the whole you do you thing. But with God's plan for our lives, it's not like you do you and like me. It's like, no, like forget about the you, because what I have in plan for you is far greater. And like Jonathan Alexander told the story of like Arnold Palmer, who like when he's playing golf, have you heard this?
No. I was just thinking about sweet tea and lemonade.
So when he's playing golf, he was like brought in, I don't know what country, but the king wanted to play on the court, and so they played, and it was great. And then the king like afterwards like, do you want, like, what do you want? I want to gift you something. And he's like, no, you don't need to. He's like, no, let me gift you something. And he's like, okay, I'll take a club. And he's like, okay. And so he moved back home to Florida and found out that this king had bought him an entire 18-hole golf course club, country club. And he's like, I just wanted a golf club. And like, this is the idea of like, when we ask for something, we're not even thinking in the realm of like what God has in store for us.
Right.
So like when the whole you do you and like selfishness of thinking what we know what we want and we don't, you have to like forget all that. Mm-hmm. I kind of saw that message a little bit in this movie too. Or like with the way you're talking about like defining yourself and like where TOB stemmed from.
Right.
Came out of that idea. Did you have something?
I thought so, but I couldn't piece it together in my mind. So
okay.
We'll come back to it if I think of something.
So on the other aspect of this with like two people, one line that I loved in the movie, it was a scene where she was a little girl again, because they were like talking, her and her identical self as adults, but they're talking and about like what's happening. She's explaining the whole thing, which I won't explain. But there's a scene where as a girl, she's doing ballet up top, and the one below is doing ballet in the subway system because they're tethered. So they're doing ballet. And so she's talking about like this, it was like after that she got this idea when she saw her and met her to like revolt. She's the one that like started it. And she was like, I gotta thank you, because if you didn't teach me how to dance, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And it made me think like our sinfulness or Satan or our bad habits, if you want to think about it as a habit, like studies ourselves. Like it looks at us and it learns from us and it adapts. So like she was like, when you danced, I danced, and I learned this movement of you, and I learned about like your life, and it helped me to like make it up top and corrupt everything. Without like studying you all my life, I wouldn't be able to do this.
So,
and the whole reason they're doing this is to untether themselves, which is like they don't like that the other person's in control.
Okay, this is really interesting. There's a saying in Latin. I'm probably gonna botch it, but it's corruptio optimi pessima est, and it means the corruption of the best things is the worst things, or are the worst things. That's kind of what I was thinking about when you were talking about that, because it seems important to me that the thing that kind of triggered this was dance. I was actually just listening to our season of dance episode.
I love that episode.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so we talked about the beauty of dance and the beauty of how that reflects the masculine and feminine genius and how they work together. So I think this ties in really well because we see that this is something that's very beautiful, something that's very powerful, something that's very good, but it's being used or corrupted for something that's very evil, right? And so kind of my thoughts with this, when we look towards our sexuality, I would say that is one of the top issues that non-Catholics have with, well, actually, and Catholics have with Catholic morality, right? All of the major issues that are always debated, almost all of them have to do with sexuality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think this makes sense, this Latin phrase, because that is the greatest gift other than our life itself that God gave us. Why? Because it's the very act that reflects and images him, right? And foreshadows heaven and God's creative power. And it's the only like act that does that, right? And so the corruption of that, like all these sexual immoralities are like these great corruptions because they're corruption of something that is so good to begin with.
Right.
And I think that's something that is misunderstood a lot in the Catholic Church, is that the Catholic Church doesn't view like sex as bad, right? There's, who was it? I want to say it's like Matt Fratt or someone says, the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, it's that it shows too little of the person. Of love.
I think that's what I was talking about. Or of a person?
Yeah. Of a person.
Okay. I know what quote you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because it shows the person obviously naked, but what this quote is saying is that there's more to a person than their body, which is what we were just talking about. There's more to a person than just this husk for your use. There's a person with dignity, with a soul, with a will and a mind that's worthy of being valued, right? And so what this quote is saying is that this is a corruption, a distortion of something that's very, very good, a person that is being reduced to something that is very minimal or bad. Right.
I'm going to switch gears real quick.
Yeah, okay.
And to another topic I really wanted to touch on that was probably one of my favorites from this movie. And it's like this idea of like doing something that's wrong, but like evil versus like circumstance. And so you see in one part of this movie, you learn some of the characters up top and down below, and you learn that there's actually two people that have swapped spots.
Okay.
And the one that came from like the privilege above to the one part to the world below, which like all they eat on is like rabbits, and they get to do these things, but they don't. And so the monologue, when you first meet them, she's like, "Just once upon a time, this little girl, and this little girl had a shadow. And while the little girl got to eat warm food, the shadow got cold food and rabbits. And while the little girl got to play with cool toys, the shadow's toys were sharp and cut through her fingers. And the little girl met her husband, and the shadow didn't get to choose the husband, it just happened. And then the little girl had her first kid, and it was a girl, and it was lovely. And the shadow had a monster, and the little girl, her second kid, and like this idea of like this parallel. And I think, this is big because it's come up like in our ministry of just like sometimes the way people act are not because they're choosing to do something wrong, so like literally don't know better, or because like of what they've grown up in or like where they're placed. It's just, this is like the culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we see that a lot, especially with the breakdown of the family structure. Yeah, I mean, if someone has a kid and doesn't know what is good, or that they're raised in a really bad circumstance, chances are, and this isn't just a theological thing, this is just a human thing.
This is just a thing.
Right?
Right.
Where we pass on what we know to our children. As parents are the primary educators, because parents are the ones that the children see all the time, right? Hopefully, right? And so they're the ones that they're learning from. That's where you learn to speak. That's where you learn your moral values, how to behave, your mannerisms, like all those things come from your parents.
Right.
And so with the breakdown of the family, and oftentimes nowadays a lack of communication amongst the family and lack of moral upbringing, sometimes we see that this is happening more and more, right?
Totally.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of that is the only way you can break the cycle is to educate yourself beyond your means.
So this is the problem we've been having, or I've been having, and then a few other people in this ministry. Like wrestling with like, so we do discipleship,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with kids one-on-one. And there are some teens that we know that like go home and like their parents are like drinking, or there's alcohol just available in the room, or like they'll be picked up from youth group and whoever's picking them up is like drunk, and then they have to drive home and they have no license. And it's like, how can I tell them about virtue and about these things and challenge them to change what they're doing if when they go home and when they go back into their regular life, they're just surrounded by, they're like, well, this is just my world.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so like what you said is good. Like it's, you know, we have to make that, but like how are they going to ever know to make that decision?
Yeah, I think it makes it obviously a lot harder. I think the simplest way is to be that light in the darkness, right?
Yeah.
Which seems cliche, but if we're being honest, even for myself, like growing up, there's a lot of things that I disagree with my family as far as morally. And for me, there's a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but certain people growing up who I look to as kind of this light. And because of that, it gives kind of a hope that there's something beyond what you know. And so even if you as a minister or just some random person, if you can be that light consistently to the point where you can convey the hope of Christ to them, then I don't know. And that's just at a base level. I mean, there's other ways that you can kind of guide or help support them. But at the base level, if you can be that light and show them what you are going through is not what you were made for, then I think a lot of times that gives hope that there's something beyond.
Yeah. It's just walking with them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's being the light, but it's also just like providing a light that can be carried too. So like just going with them in this journey.
Yeah.
I think it's just hard sometimes when you see it.
Oh yeah.
And you're just like, oh.
Yeah. And it's so sad because also no matter what you do as a youth minister, the parents will always have more influence than you.
Yeah.
Right. And so unfortunately, if there is a broken family or parents who are alcoholic or whatever the situation is, they will always have more influence than whatever you do, for better or for worse, you know? And so that's why also I think a lot of our ministry as youth ministers isn't just ministering to the teens, but ministering to the families as a whole.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And so it's really important that we reach out and like we help the parents, right? Because that's essentially what our job is as youth ministers. It's to assist the parents
right
in raising the children.
Chris always has this like kind of mantra. It's like if parents did what they were supposed to, if our parents did things right, then we would be out of a job.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Well, and we know that's like not necessarily the case because we'd still be like a pastoral
right
type of
and I think
tool.
I think that's like the ideal, right?
Yeah,
But
totally.
I think it's like an unrealistic ideal, because of how difficult parenting is. Like obviously, neither of us have kids, right?
I do not have a kid.
Great, me either.
Or more than one kid.
So, maybe we're not the best to be breaking this down, but
No,
I think
we're not bashing on any parents, by the way.
oh yeah.
We're like saying like anyone's doing
For sure.
it, like, or, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think parenting obviously is very difficult, right? And especially now that families are being more broken, I think it's being made even more difficult to raise without going through these situations.
Right.
But then also, we specialize. Our job is to know theology and to know what are the best ways to do this, whereas parents, most likely, most of the parents that we're working with, they never studied theology. They don't know, like, what are the best ways to raise children in the faith, right? And so having this outside source is always helpful. And also, there's the saying, like, it takes a village to raise a kid, right? Because think back to when we were in high school and middle school. If my parents told me something, I wanted to do the opposite, right? And so having these outside voices, I think, is really important too.
That's true. As a last small theme, there was like a really interesting theme of like privilege, and in the sense of those two characters that you realized later on had swapped places. The one that was above ground now had completely forgotten that he was the tethered body.
Can I ask a question off of that?
Yeah.
Does she have control over the other person now?
Which one?
Does the shadow that came to the top, does she have control over the main person who's now in the bottom? Have the roles kind of switched? It sounds like she would have to, or they've become untethered, one of the two.
Well, he.
Because
I'd have to see it again.
Okay.
Honestly. That's a good question.
Because I think that's a really...
The only time you actually see them, their tetheredness, is it replays the scene of her as a girl, and it shows like the whole carnival, and then like the hallways of the subway, and like people like miming like they're riding a roller coaster and stuff, like everyone, because like the girl is walking through the carnival and the girls below is walking through the carnival, and it shows how they meet. And then the other part is the son realizes he can control like his copy right away, so he like walks backwards and the other one walks backwards, and he notices like he's miming it, and he uses that to his advantage throughout the movie. We don't see it a ton otherwise, and I think it's because of this like awareness of the tethered. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like I think the boy, his identical is a little off because he burnt himself, and so he always wore a mask, and so I think he was a little more like animalistic than the rest. That's another thing about the movie I just forgot about. Like the copies don't speak really. The one did, but they just use audible sounds. So they only speak in like grunts or in like moans, just like an animal.
I think this is interesting because if that is the case where the shadow who's now on top is in control, we see kind of this this allowance of this, I don't know, this false self to kind of take control of the real self. And I think that's what happens a lot when we revert to these animalistic natures and kind of make that the forefront of our identity. Yeah. So that's just a side note, but
yeah, no. And the only other thing was like the person that came from the world and then fell. You saw they just adapted. They like, because of the circumstance of what it was like below eating this, like they became totally corrupt and indistinguishable between any other tethered person. And I think like that goes back to circumstance and just anything else. Just like there is this balance of like knowing where you are now, but also knowing where you came from. Like right. If you've improved,
yeah,
but also if circumstances gotten worse for you, like remembering how good it has been and like, or how other people have it. Because the other thing is like the one that forgot where she came from the one that forgot where he came from knew that like the other people, the other tethered, were still suffering. Or the one that like fell in knew there was other people probably above ground. Like by the time the revolt happened, he was in on it too.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
So did you have one last theme before I cut you off?
That was it.
Like
the theme of privilege and like switching and like how we can adapt to a new circumstance
yeah.
and forget the old. That was like a really interesting, like that I thought that was like really interesting. I don't know how that really correlates into like the Christ and culture thing, but I just like wanted to bring that up.
Well, I think it does correlate into morality in the way that
if we do something long enough,
we become who we're surrounded with. Or yeah, if we do something long enough, we start to take that on as the norm. Because
that's true.
Humans are people of habits, right? And so we are affected by the habits that we do, right? So if we repeatedly do good habits, those are virtues. If we repeatedly do bad habits, those become vices, right? And so we have habits of everything. right? That's why, like, we have this internal clock, right? We have this habit of waking up at the same time every day. Well, now we don't even need a clock anymore. We just wake up, so our bodies adapt to the things that we become accustomed to. And so if we become accustomed to a certain sin or darkness, then that becomes the norm for us. And I think that's the same with who we surround ourselves with. It's kind of like the Eskimo wolf trap that we've talked about on here before.
Yeah.
Where we kind of just become numb to what's happening to us.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, then, as like a sort of challenge, really, I just, based off what we're talking about, like the two persons, the parts of the body, like changing our habits based on if we're doing something wrong or right, like long enough, like just sort of doing an examine this week, but not a daily examine. So not like one where you're examining your day. I want you to like do it just one time this week. Sit down, find a normal examine and do it the way it is, but kind of like do it with your life. So you don't have to go moment by moment, but just like what you deem important moments of your life. So from like childhood, what was good and bad influences, and or how do you in your childhood, how did that affect you? Like you only remember a bad childhood. Well, where was God?
Okay, so kind of like finding a highlight reel and blooper reel of your life.
Exactly. And seeing where you've come from, and then also seeing maybe what you've lost along the way. Because both are going to happen. And maybe make one change after that, just one small adjustment. Whether it's like, like Clint said earlier, like he's just changing like some health habits. Just like one small thing, like I want to go to bed, even if it's a minute earlier. And I'm just going to make that a goal. And
commit to it.
But commit to it, yeah. Whatever you think he needs. Or like, I'm just going to call a friend because there was this friend in high school. And just now that I was thinking about it, he like made me a better person and I haven't talked to him or her. And so like reaching out, whatever it is, you may come up with it, but just do a blooper and highlight reel of your life real quick. And then from that, pick one thing to just kind of focus on this week.
Cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Shout outs.
I already said a few. David from the retreat, he doesn't listen to this podcast. Maybe he will one day, I don't know. But he made the retreat for me. Yeah, I think that's it.
Cool. I have a couple. I want to give another shout out to Monica Hollingshed.
Yes. Yeah.
Hollingshed.
Hollingshed.
I hope I'm saying it right. I don't know. But Monica, you've just been crushing like every episode we've been putting out. So
that's true.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you going through, and I hope you're enjoying it still. And then a couple other ones. Cherry Salah, I think is her name.
Cool.
So she's been listening to quite a few. And then I think you gave a shout out last week to our new patron, Kenzie Elsburn. But he's a good friend of mine. So I want to give a shout out to Kenzie. Thank you so much for supporting, not just financially, but like he's been a huge support from the very beginning. So thanks, Kenzie. And yeah, looking forward to doing your special episode for you. So
yeah,
that'll be fun. If you guys are interested in helping support us as well, and well, we have right now we're recording live video for all of our episodes. So if you want access to that and a whole lot of other content and stuff like that, as well as if you're one of the first 5 patrons, your own episode, if you want access to that kind of stuff, check out our Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/thechristinculture, and you can support us there. Depending on what tier you join, you'll be getting different gifts back from us, including bonus content and access to different things like that.
Yeah.
We also have some merch and stuff that we're working on sending out too. So depending on what level, you might get some of that merch too.
Totally.
Also, on top of that, feel free to check out our website, thechristinculture.com. We've been putting more blog posts on there recently, so go check those out.
We have like 6 now, maybe?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Gordon just put one out. Casey, our seminarian, just put one out, and I think Gordon and I have been working on a big group of some that should be coming out hopefully pretty soon. So keep looking out for those. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Anything else that I'm missing? Oh, follow us on Twitter at on The Adventure, and on Facebook, just The Christ and Culture. I think that's it.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you guys for joining us on The Adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to whatever you were listening to us on. And please leave us a review so more people can find us, because your one click of a button or a short review can help us reach tens, 20s, hundreds of new people. So please help us do that.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you, and have a good week, guys. Enjoy the adventure. If only you could see their faces. That's the real priceless part.
Funny part is, I imagine if we weren't recording, we'd all be like chatting it up and talking, and they don't want to say a word.
Yeah.
Shut someone up, set up a podcast.
I forgot they were recording today, and we just walked in on them by accident.
Oh, it's all good.